The penthouse looked perfect from the street. Gleaming windows, expensive curtains, the kind of place that screamed success and safety. But inside, a child's voice cracked through the marble hallway. "Mom, please, please stop." Her small hands trembled as she tried to shield herself, tears streaming down her cheeks as her mother stood over her, breathing hard with a kitchen trash bin in her hands. A rage no 7-year-old should ever witness. No one else was home. No security detail, no staff, no witnesses. Just a terrified little girl and a woman who had lost every ounce of control. "You think you're special because he chose you?" Karen hissed, lifting the trash bin higher. "You think your precious daddy will save you? He's not even here. He never is." Chloe sobbed harder, her blonde hair already streaked with something wet from the bin. She tried to back away, but the kitchen counter trapped her. The moment she flinched, Karen's grip tightened on the plastic container. "This is what happens when you waste food, when you make messes, when you ruin everything you touch, and then—" The private elevator dinged, slow, quiet, dangerous. Heavy footsteps echoed across imported Italian marble, designer shoes, measured pace, the kind of walk that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Karen froze mid-motion, the trash bin still raised above Chloe's head. Chloe's breath hitched, relief flooding her tear-stained face despite the terror. Because only one man walked like that. Only one man could turn a room of violence into a room that held its breath and waited for judgment. Her father, the Mafia boss. Vince Callahan stepped through the elevator doors and saw everything. The trash bin raised like a weapon, the food and waste already clinging to his daughter's blonde hair, the red handprint on Chloe's cheek, the absolute terror in her eyes that should have lit up when Daddy came home, not filled with the desperate hope of a prisoner seeing their executioner arrive. He didn't shout. He didn't move. He just stared. A silence so cold that Karen's hands started shaking. The trash bin wobbled in her grip. Because in that single moment she realized something crucial. The man who had married her for companionship, who had welcomed her into his fortress, who had given her access to a world of luxury and power. That man had just become something else entirely. She had forgotten who Vince Callahan really was. She had forgotten that he didn't build a criminal empire by being reasonable or forgiving. She had forgotten that men twice her size crossed the street when they saw him coming. She had forgotten that the tattoos hidden under his expensive suit weren't decorative, they were a resume. And she had just hurt his daughter. Vince's dark eyes moved slowly from Karen's flushed, angry face down to Chloe. Sweet Chloe with spaghetti sauce in her hair and coffee grounds on her dress and a bruise forming on her tiny wrist. His jaw clenched once. His hands flexed at his sides, his shoulders squared in a way that made Karen's survival instincts start screaming. "Chloe," he said quietly, never breaking eye contact with Karen. His voice was steady, controlled, but Karen heard the warning underneath, the promise of violence restrained only by a thread. She heard death walking closer. "Come to Daddy, princess." Before we begin the full story, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's see what happens when Vince Callahan stops being a boss and becomes something far more dangerous. It started with spaghetti. Chloe had been carrying her plate to the table when her foot caught the edge of the kitchen rug. The ceramic exploded against the marble floor, sending tomato sauce and meatballs sliding across Karen's pristine white tiles like a crime scene. The 7-year-old froze, staring at the mess, her small hands flying to her mouth. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "You never mean to." Karen's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. She had been standing at the counter, already wound tight from a day of perceived slights. Vince's empty promises to be home early, the charity luncheon where she'd been ignored by the other wives, the constant reminder that she was married to power but would never truly possess it. "You never mean to, but you always do. Always making messes. Always ruining things. Chloe dropped to her knees, frantically trying to scoop up the food with her bare hands. I'll clean it up. I promise I'll clean it. Don't touch it. Karen's screech bounced off the custom cabinets. You'll just make it worse. You make everything worse. That's when Karen saw the kitchen trash can, the big industrial one that the housekeeper usually emptied. It was overflowing. Coffee grounds, eggshells, food scraps, the detritus of a household that generated waste like it generated money. Something inside her snapped clean in half. She grabbed the bin with both hands, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the plastic. Chloe's eyes went wide. She scrambled backward on the floor, her small body slipping in the sauce. Mom, please! You want to act like trash? Karen lifted the bin higher, her face flushed crimson with rage that had nothing to do with spilled dinner and everything to do with a life she couldn't control. You want to make messes like an animal? Fine, let's see how you like living in it. Please stop! Chloe's voice cracked, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'll be good. I promise I'll be... Karen tipped the bin. The contents cascaded over Chloe's blonde hair in a grotesque waterfall. Coffee grounds, vegetable peelings, soggy paper towels, yesterday's leftover Chinese food. It clung to her hair, slid down her face, soaked into her pink dress. The smell hit immediately, sour milk and rotting fruit and waste. Chloe made a sound that wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of something breaking inside a child's chest. The elevator chimed. Karen's hands were still holding the empty trash bin when she heard those footsteps. Measured, slow, deliberate. The kind of walk that made the marble seem to tremble. Vince Callahan stepped into his kitchen and stopped breathing. His daughter was on the floor covered in garbage. His wife was standing over her with an empty trash bin, breathing hard like she'd just finished something that required physical exertion. The smell hit him next. The reek of waste and humiliation and something darker, something that made every instinct in his predator's brain start screaming. Vince looked down at his own hands. Watched the tattoos on his knuckles shift as his fists clenched so tight the skin went white. A snake eating its tail, a skull with roses, ink that represented every violent promise he'd ever made and kept. The room went silent. Karen's face drained of color as she finally understood what she'd done. The man she'd married for his money, for his protection, for his dangerous glamour was staring at her like she was a problem that needed to be erased from existence. Vince, she started, her voice shaking. She spilled her dinner, and I was just trying to teach her about consequences. Don't. The single word stopped her mid-sentence. Vince's voice was quiet, controlled, lethal. Don't say another word. He moved past Karen like she wasn't there, like she was already a ghost, already forgotten. He knelt in the garbage and the sauce and the waste, his $3,000 suit absorbing filth without hesitation, and reached for his daughter. Chloe looked up at him with coffee grounds in her hair and terror in her eyes, and Vince Callahan felt something inside him die and something far more dangerous be born in its place. Stay with me until the end, because what this Mafia boss does next will redefine what it means to protect family, and what happens when a mother crosses the one line that should never be crossed. Vince stepped forward, and his $1,000 Italian leather shoes crunched against the debris scattered across the marble floor. Coffee grounds, eggshells, rotting lettuce, the remnants of last night's dinner. He walked through it all like he was walking through the wreckage of someone's last mistake. Each footstep was deliberate. Each crunch of trash beneath his soles was a countdown Karen could hear in her bones. Vince, let me explain. Karen's voice came out strangled, desperate. She lowered the trash bin slowly, as if that would somehow undo what he'd already witnessed. She spilled her entire plate. Again. She's 7 years old and she can't eat without making a disaster. I'm trying to teach her. Teach her? Vince's voice was so quiet it barely qualified as a whisper, yet it cut through Karen's excuses like a blade through silk. He still hadn't looked at her. His eyes were locked on Chloe, his daughter pressed against the kitchen counter, trembling, covered in garbage and shame. She ruins everything. Karen's desperation turned shrill. The carpets, the furniture, my grandmother's vase last week. I'm just trying to teach her that actions have consequences. If you were here more often, maybe you'd understand that raising a child requires... Chloe. Vince's voice remained steady, controlled. Go to your room, princess. Lock the door. Put your headphones on. Don't come out until I come get you. Chloe didn't move at first. Her red-rimmed eyes darted between her father and the woman who had just baptized her in filth. She looked terrified, not of what might happen to Karen, but of what might happen if she left her father alone with this version of her mother. Now, baby girl. Vince's tone softened just enough to break through her fear. Daddy needs to handle something. Chloe ran. Her small feet slipped once on something wet, but she caught herself and disappeared down the hallway. The sound of her bedroom door slamming echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. Then there was silence. Vince finally looked at Karen. Really looked at her. And she saw everything she'd been too blind or too arrogant to notice before. She saw the man who'd made 3 rival families disappear in a single month. She saw the enforcer who'd built his reputation on the broken bones of people who'd underestimated him. She saw her husband looking at her the way he looked at problems that needed permanent solutions. You treated my daughter like garbage, Vince said, each word measured and precise. Now you join it. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket with the kind of casual grace that made Karen's blood turn to ice water. 1 button. That's all it took. Marcus, he said when someone answered. His voice was calm, almost conversational, as if he were ordering lunch instead of ending a life. Penthouse. Now. Bring 2 men. Vince, no. Karen lunged forward, reaching for him, but he sidestepped her with barely a glance. You have 5 minutes before they arrive, he said, sliding the phone back into his pocket. I'd suggest you use that time to make peace with whatever God you think might forgive you, because I sure as hell won't. We're married, Karen's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face now. Real tears, the kind born from fear rather than frustration. You can't just throw me out. I have rights. This is my home too. Your home? Vince's laugh was hollow, empty of anything resembling humor. This penthouse is in my name. The cars are registered to my company. Every credit card you carry is connected to my accounts. You don't own a single thing in this building except the clothes on your back, and frankly, I'm considering taking those too. The elevator dinged. Marcus emerged first, 6'4" of solid muscle, wrapped in a black suit. 2 other men followed, both carrying the kind of presence that came from years of doing Vince Callahan's dirty work. Boss? Marcus surveyed the scene, the trash scattered across the floor, Karen's tear-streaked face, the smell of garbage permeating the expensive penthouse air. Mrs. Albright is leaving us, Vince said without inflection. Immediately. She takes nothing. No purse, no phone, no jewelry. Escort her to the street. Make sure she understands she's never welcome in this building again. Karen's eyes went wide. You can't be serious. Make sure she understands, Vince continued, his tone dropping even lower. What happens to people who threaten my family? Marcus nodded once. That was all it took. Years of working together meant Marcus understood exactly what Vince wasn't saying. The implicit threat that came with banishment from Vince Callahan's protection. Karen screamed as Marcus's hand closed around her upper arm. She twisted, tried to pull away, but the other 2 men moved in to bracket her. This is illegal! You can't just kidnap me from my own home. I'll call the police. You'll do nothing, Vince said, finally stepping directly into her path. He stood between Karen and the hallway leading to Chloe's room, a living wall blocking her from even the sight of his daughter. Because if you try to come back here, if you try to contact Chloe, if you so much as speak my daughter's name to anyone, you won't have to worry about the police. You'll have to worry about me. Karen's struggles weakened as the full weight of her situation crashed down on her. The men dragged her toward the elevator, her designer heels scraping against marble, leaving marks on the floor she'd once obsessed over keeping perfect. "Vince, please!" Her voice echoed through the penthouse as the elevator doors began to close. "Don't do this! I'm sorry! I'll change! The doors sealed shut, cutting off her pleas mid-sentence. Vince stood motionless in the wreckage of his kitchen, surrounded by garbage and broken promises, listening to the elevator descend. 30 floors down, 30 floors between his daughter and the woman who'd tried to destroy her. He didn't move until the elevator reached the lobby, didn't breathe until he was certain Karen was gone. Only then did his shoulders drop slightly, the iron control slipping just enough to reveal the exhaustion underneath. But there was no time to process what he'd just done. Down the hallway, behind a locked door, his daughter was waiting. Scared, alone, covered in the physical manifestation of someone else's cruelty. Vince looked down at his ruined shoes, at the coffee grounds staining Italian leather that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He didn't care. He had a daughter to clean up and a promise to keep. The penthouse was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of silence that follows a hurricane, where the absence of chaos feels almost unnatural. Karen was gone, escorted out by security with nothing but the clothes on her back and the memory of Vince's final words echoing in her ears. The marble floors still bore the evidence of her cruelty, scattered coffee grounds, wilted lettuce, the metallic smell of old takeout containers. But Vince wasn't looking at the mess on his imported Italian tile. He was looking at his daughter. Chloe stood frozen against the kitchen counter, exactly where Karen had trapped her. Her blonde hair was matted with spaghetti sauce and something dark that might have been coffee grounds. Her dress, the pretty lavender one with the butterfly on the collar, was ruined, stained with streaks of brown and red. Her small hands were still raised defensively, as if the threat might materialize again from thin air. Vince crossed the space between them slowly, deliberately, the way you approach a wounded animal that doesn't yet understand it's safe. His expensive suit trousers whispered against the marble with each step. When he reached her, he lowered himself to one knee, ignoring the cold wetness that immediately soaked through the fabric. $3,000 pants meeting kitchen waste. He didn't even blink. His hand moved toward her face and Chloe flinched hard, her entire body jerking backward as if expecting a blow. The movement broke something in Vince's chest, something that had already been cracking since the moment he stepped off that elevator. "Princess," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's over. She's gone." He reached out again, slower this time, and gently brushed a piece of wilted lettuce from her hair. His fingers were careful, reverent almost, treating her like porcelain that might shatter under too firm a touch. Chloe's lower lip trembled. Her red-rimmed eyes, those beautiful eyes that should have been filled with laughter, stared at him with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "I'm sorry I wasn't here," Vince whispered, and his voice cracked on the last word. "I'm so sorry, baby girl." He didn't wait for her response. He simply opened his arms, and after one heartbeat of hesitation, Chloe launched herself at him with a sob that seemed too big for her small body. Vince caught her, crushing her against his chest, his tattooed arms wrapping around her like a fortress. She smelled like garbage and fear and strawberry shampoo underneath it all. He buried his face in her ruined hair and felt her tears soaking through his silk shirt. "Never again," he murmured into her hair. "Never again, Chloe. I promise." He stood with her still clutching his neck. Her legs wrapped around his waist like she used to do when she was smaller, when the world was safer and fathers could actually protect their children from every monster. He carried her through the penthouse, past the mess, past the evidence of Karen's rage, straight to the master bathroom with its marble counters and rainfall shower. Vince set Chloe down gently on the closed toilet seat and knelt in front of her again. His knees protested. The suit pants were definitely ruined now, but he didn't care. He reached for the hem of her stained dress. "Let's get you cleaned up, okay?" She nodded mutely, lifting her arms so he could pull the fabric over her head. The dress went straight into the trash. He'd burn it later. Burn every reminder of this nightmare. The shower took 15 minutes. Vince washed her hair twice with her favorite strawberry shampoo, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he worked the suds through the tangles, carefully picking out pieces of debris that Karen had weaponized against his daughter. Chloe stood still under the warm spray, her small hands pressed against his forearms, anchoring herself to his presence. When the water finally ran clear, Vince wrapped her in the softest towel he could find. One of the Egyptian cotton ones Karen had insisted cost more than most people's monthly rent. He carried Chloe to his bedroom, the master suite that suddenly felt too big, too cold, too empty. They ended up on the floor. Vince sat with his back against the bed, his ruined suit pants stretched out in front of him. Chloe sat between his legs, wrapped in her towel, while he dried her hair with another, his movements slow and methodical. Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered with 1,000 lights, the city carrying on below them, unaware that something fundamental had shifted in the Callahan penthouse. "Daddy?" Chloe's voice was small, hesitant, testing if it was safe to speak. "Yeah, Princess?" "Is she really not coming back?" Vince's hands stilled in her hair for just a moment. Then he set the towel aside and turned her around to face him. He took her small face between his hands, his thumbs brushing away the fresh tears that had started to fall. "She's never coming back," he said firmly. "I promise you, Chloe. No one, not her, not anyone, will ever hurt you again. You understand me?" Chloe nodded, her lips still trembling. "And if anyone ever tries," Vince continued, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that made criminals confess their sins, "they'll answer to me. Because you're mine, you're my daughter, and I protect what's mine." "Even from moms?" The question was whispered, afraid. "Especially from moms who forget what that word is supposed to mean." Something released in Chloe's expression, some tension she'd been holding for months, maybe longer. She threw her arms around his neck again, and this time, there was no sob. Just a sigh. Just relief. Just the sound of a little girl finally believing she was safe. Vince held her there on the floor of his bedroom, his expensive suit completely ruined, his reputation as Chicago's most feared crime boss temporarily suspended. In this moment, he wasn't Vincent Callahan, the man who made problems disappear. He wasn't the boss whose name made grown men nervous. He was just Dad. And that, Vince realized as Chloe's breathing gradually evened out against his shoulder, was the only title that had ever really mattered. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about redemption, family, and the lengths we go to protect the ones we love. Drop a comment below telling me, what would you have done in Vince's situation? And don't forget to share this with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to choose what truly matters. Which kindness. Every day. Any day.